The muddy waters of Kenya's Mara River surged like a living creature, brown and violent after a night of relentless rain. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy mist rising from the flood-swollen current. David Thompson, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer with 8 years of field experience, steadied his tripod on the trembling ground, oblivious to the moment that would soon change his life, and the world's understanding of wild animal behavior. He was in the middle of adjusting his camera's focus when a high-pitched cry shattered the morning calm. A lion cub, no more than 4 months old, had slipped from the edge of the riverbank. The earth gave way beneath its tiny paws, and in seconds, the baby was swallowed by the raging current. For a split second, David froze. Every wildlife photographer's code was clear: never interfere. Let nature take its course. But as he watched the cub's terrified eyes and flailing paws vanish beneath the surface, something in his chest broke that rule apart. He threw his camera aside and leapt into the river. Greater than, I didn't think. I just moved, David would later tell investigators. I could hear the cub crying, and I knew, if I didn't do something, it would die. The Mara River, however, was no place for human heroics. Beneath the muddy surface lurked twisted roots, jagged debris, and unseen predators. The water slammed into David's chest, nearly knocking the air from his lungs. His boots dragged against hidden rocks as he pushed forward, scanning the churning brown waves for any sign of the cub. Then, a flash of golden fur. The cub bobbed weakly to the surface, gasping, eyes wide with terror. David lunged, the current shoving him sideways. Something, a submerged log, struck his shoulder, sending a shock of pain through his body. He almost blacked out, but instinct, raw and human, took over. He stretched his arm, caught the cub by the scruff, and pulled it against his chest. The tiny creature clung to him instantly, claws digging through his soaked shirt, trembling, its heart hammering like a trapped bird's. Greater than, it was holding on to me as if it knew I was its only chance, David recalled. Every muscle in his body screamed as he fought his way back toward the bank. Behind him, the current roared like thunder. Ahead, safety, or so he thought. But as his feet finally found the muddy riverbed, David froze. Standing at the river's edge were 6 lions. 5 lionesses, and 1 massive, dark-maned male. A full pride. They stood perfectly still, forming a semicircle. Eyes locked on him. No growling. No roaring. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating, electric. David's breath hitched. He knew what that silence meant. The pride had found their missing cub, and the human who now held it in his arms. He couldn't move, couldn't run. He was trapped, chest deep in the river, with nowhere to go. Then, the largest lioness, her fur glistening in the sunlight, eyes fierce yet strangely calm, took a step forward. David's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He expected the charge, the fatal attack that would end him in seconds. But it never came. Instead, she bowed. The lioness lowered her head, slowly, deliberately, her massive paws sending ripples through the water. Her eyes met David's, not with rage, but something else. Something that made every hair on his body stand on end. Recognition. Gratitude. The cub in David's arms began to mew softly. The lioness answered with a low, rolling chuff, the sound a mother makes to calm her frightened child. David swallowed hard. It's okay, little one, he whispered. Your family's here. The matriarch stepped closer, now just 3 feet away. David could feel her warm breath against his face. Then, in a moment that defied every law of nature, the lioness extended her head and began to groom him. Her rough tongue brushed against his forehead, once, twice, a gesture reserved only for her pride. A signal, an acceptance. Around them, the other lionesses began to relax. The massive male settled on his haunches, watching in silence, eyes calm. The tension melted away, replaced by something almost sacred. David stood motionless, every nerve alive, tears mixing with river water. Greater than, she was telling me I was safe, he later said. She was saying thank you. When the grooming ended, the lioness stepped aside, giving him a path. The pride parted, making room, as if escorting him toward safety. David carefully placed the cub on the ground. The little one scrambled toward his mother, who immediately began to nuzzle and check him, purring in deep, resonant tones of relief. The scene unfolding before David's camera, still recording, was pure, wordless poetry. A mother's love, a human's compassion, and a bridge between two worlds that rarely touched. But the miracle wasn't over. As David began to step back, trembling but unharmed, the matriarch looked up and made a sound unlike any he had ever heard, a deep, soft rumble, almost conversational. The rest of the pride responded instantly, moving into a formation that took David's breath away. Two perfect lines, flanking him on both sides, forming a pathway back to his camera gear under the acacia tree. Greater than, they were escorting me, David whispered into the microphone. They're seeing me out. The male took position to David's left, the matriarch to his right. The cub trotted between them, brushing occasionally against David's leg as they walked together through the golden grass, a man in a pride of lions, moving in perfect harmony. At his equipment, the procession stopped. The matriarch turned, her amber eyes glowing in the sunlight, and gently pressed her forehead against David's, the final gesture of trust. It was a farewell. Greater than, thank you, David whispered, voice breaking. One by one, each lion approached, touching him softly with their noses or brushing against his legs before turning away. Even the massive male lion leaned forward and nudged David's shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement and peace. The cub, the tiny creature he had nearly died to save, was last. It sat before him, tilted its head, and released a small mew. David crouched down and stroked the soft fur between its ears. Greater than, stay safe, little one. Then, as silently as they had appeared, the pride turned and walked away into the golden savanna. Weeks later, the footage went viral, authenticated, analyzed, and praised by experts worldwide. Dr. Jane Goodall called it, a moment that redefines the boundary between human and animal empathy. Dr. Sarah Mbeki, the wildlife biologist who led the behavioral analysis, said, greater than, what we saw was not instinct. It was comprehension, gratitude, a moral awareness we thought only humans possessed. The lion pride became the focus of an international research project. Scientists discovered that they often lingered near David's campsite, never threatening him, as if remembering their shared history. The rescued cub, now strong and confident, would sometimes rest beside David's vehicle, using its shadow for shelter. Locals began calling him Simba's brother. Tourists traveled from around the world hoping to glimpse the legendary photographer and his lion family. David never claimed to be a hero. Greater than, I'm not special, he told reporters. Anyone with a heart would have done the same. But what happened that day proved something extraordinary, that compassion is not limited by species, and that sometimes, the wild recognizes kindness in a way deeper than words. In the heart of the Mara, where the circle of life can be both cruel and beautiful, one act of courage forever changed the way humans understand the soul of a lion.